This is The Meek Informant, your content source for Legend of the Five Rings, published by Fantasy Flight Games. Enjoy the show. Hey everybody, welcome to The Meek Informant, your podcast for the meek and uninformed. I'm Adam, joining you all the way from San Diego, and I'm joined tonight, or this afternoon, depending on your time zone, with...
Hello, it's Nick. Yeah, it is definitely night here. Seems like it is just afternoon there, but you know.
Yeah. Yes, indeed. So, we're happy to get on the podcast train again here. As we've mentioned in the past, we're still doing other content other places like YouTube and Twitch. We have, obviously, the Meek Informant, which is focused on L5R, but also the Boardgame Informant, and you can find that on YouTube mostly. We're going to be doing a bunch of live streams of games, which we've already been doing, but we also have some new up-and-coming ones that are focused on upcoming Kickstarter. So check out the Boardgame Informant YouTube for that.
Yes, yeah, I think it's worth noting we're going to be doing a live stream with the creator of Import Export, a board game that Johnny is a big fan of. I've never played, but it looks pretty cool. So we're going to be doing a live stream of that on August 13th.
Yeah, so that's a week from today of this recording, I believe, correct? Is that right?
No.
A week and a day. Week and a day.
Next Tuesday.
Yeah. Great. And yeah, if you want to stay abreast of all of our Meek Informant and Board Game Informant information, we did mention, I believe, on one of the last podcasts briefly, that we did start a Patreon page. And I want to say that, in no way do we look to make money with our Patreon. It's really just a sustainability and to kind of make things better over time. So, there's other ways you can support us by going to our Facebook page, following us on Twitter, liking us on YouTube, both at The Meek Informant and at Board Game Informant, following us on twitch.tv, all that great stuff. But if you do have the finances, or you feel like your money would be well spent by us, enhancing our podcasts and or YouTubes, we are at patreon.com/meekinformant, and you can find our little blurb there about all that good stuff. Again, we're not trying to make money here. We're actually leaving most of our money on there until we have enough to get some new gear. And we have a bunch of tiers there. The tiers are focused on both L5R and board gaming. If you like one or the other or both, you can get some benefits. And you can go read on there. It's $2, $5, $10. And then we have some sponsor level. And right now, it's probably worth mentioning who those some of those Patreons are. And we totally appreciate them. The first one we have to mention is Maddie at Luxury Playstyle. And I think he was our first at all Patreon. And as you guys all know, guys and gals who have listened to us, we've had Maddie sponsoring us, who's been on our show. You can go check out his great tokens for L5R and any other great games out there, including Keyforge and Arkham Horror and etc. But you can go to luxplay.com, and if you're doing checkout, you can do Lux Informant, and you get a little bit of a discount on your prices purchasing.
15%, significant.
Yeah, it's pretty good. It's pretty great, actually.
Yeah.
And beyond that, we have one of our local friends and store owners, co-store owner, and that's Jay. Him and his wife and a couple of their friends all opened up Midgard Games about 2.5 years ago now, I want to say. And that place is pretty amazing. If you're ever in New England and specifically New Hampshire, it's definitely worth stopping by. And, it looks like a game store. It is a game store on the outside, but they have such a great play area for all gaming styles and gaming interests that Jay is like a lover of all games. He actually played old L5R for a long time. He's a longtime Crane player. And I remember kind of giving jabs at him when I was just starting the game as a Scorpion player, and him and I went back and forth. So we're very happy that he went ahead and supported us through Patreon, as anyone else can do. And Midgard Games and Comics in Derry, New Hampshire. And I want to thank Jay specifically because he's kind of pretty pumped about doing stuff. He's actually pretty high level, so he's going to get to play a game with us on the Board Game Informant. And he gets to pick that. He's kind of already alluded to what he wants to play. I won't spoil that here because we got to all decide together. But he has a pretty big interest. He likes those heavy games as well. So you can expect to see something pretty fun and pretty heavy there.
Awesome.
And then the last two, but definitely not the least, is we have a new but old friend of ours, So Lauren, and I need your help here, Nick. How do I say
I
their last name?
believe it's Ortgieson, I think.
All right, Ortgieson. And she and her husband Ray come to pretty much every game tournament in Midgard that they can. They were just at Gen Con. We're going to try and have them on for an episode about that in a couple weeks. And so she just joined this week. And last but not least, our very, very first, I think, true Patreon. I think I might have misspoke before. I think Luxury Playstyle was our first supporter. But from a Patreon perspective, I think Randy White was our first Patreon supporter. We want to thank Randy for doing that and being the first to step up. And we totally appreciate his support. Hopefully, he is getting value out of the money he's spending. And that's pretty much our Patreon. So if you're interested or able to, go ahead and check out our patreon.com/meekinformant.
Cool. So yeah, things to talk about this week. So we want to get to talking about deck testing because we talked last time about deck building, and now you got to figure out how if what you've made is any good. But first up, most importantly, there is a charity tournament coming up this weekend. Actually, it's kind of a whole weekend of charity events at Midgard Comics and Games in Derry. And it's all to benefit the Brandon Russell Memorial Fund through the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention. So this is something where the Brandon passed away a couple of years ago. His parents are members of the Midgard community, and they put this on to try to help raise funds for the memorial. So we decided to throw ourselves in. Dave, Onino Dave on Twitter, Dave of the Five Rings on Cardboard Republic, came up with this format called Daimyo, which you might have heard a little bit about. It's an attempt to make L5R quicker and shorter and like a little more, I don't know, explosive's probably not the right word, but like more focused, because the way it works is you get to choose a character and they have to have the Daimyo, Elemental Master, or Champion trait. But every turn you can put that character into play from out of play for free. So basically you always have that character available, and then you build your deck around that. But your deck has to be all singletons and only 30 cards, 30 Dynasty and Conflict. So you end up with a 30-30 deck, all singleton. It's way less consistent. You're not seeing like 3 copies of Let Go for all your attachments and stuff. But it makes the game much quicker. It leads to some really interesting strategies and things you wouldn't think to see, but stuff that really, really works well. So the tournament, we're going to be streaming it on Twitch. This is going to be on Sunday, but like I said, they're doing events all weekend. If you're a war gamer, I know they're doing some Age of Sigmar and 40K stuff. So that kind of thing is definitely going on. I would say check the Facebook page. We're going to put that in the show notes. Check there for more information.
So you said Sunday. We'll say Sunday, August 11th, 2019. But the cool thing is, as you mentioned, we're going to be on Twitch.tv streaming this. I believe you have a way for people to donate themselves, and that gives them access to a couple of cool donated prizes that they'll be eligible for. Is that correct?
Yeah, so there's going to be a charity raffle going. There is basically you can buy tickets. I believe, and I have this written down somewhere, but I believe it's $2 for a ticket, 3 tickets for 5, or 7 tickets for 10. I could be wrong about that, but we will update that with the stream. So you guys remotely will be able to, even if you're not able to make it down to the tournament, you can donate on our stream. And we have a website set up with DonorBox that'll give us all the information we need to enter your name into the raffle. And the prizes we have are actually like really amazing. So first off, Maddie from Luxury Playstyle donated a $75 gift certificate, which is huge. That'll go a long way towards getting you all those clan tokens. Yeah.
Yeah.
Especially, by the way, if you use the code Lux Informant.
Yeah.
Just saying, double up. Dave is donating some old school L5R swag, including things like a Race to Volturnum poster, which is like the end of the second main arc from the original game's storyline. There is, I believe, I know for a fact there are full art Halls of the Daimyo, which is the stronghold that you use when you're playing Daimyo format. Those are going to be available. I believe there's some art from Rihanna McCullough, although don't quote me on that. She designed the Halls of the Daimyo card and does a lot of the cool local art stuff. So just a ton of different stuff. And I may donate a couple of playmats because my wife wants me to get rid of some. So I might.
I'm donating my Tadaka one. I have 2, and I'm like, I have no need for this, and I have like 50 other playmats. So my Tadaka playmat's going in there, And I don't know if that's listed anywhere, but I am hoping that I can get a hold of Jay and make sure it's at least in the overall pool.
Yeah, perfect. So we're going to be running that all through the course of the event. We're going to be doing some live commentary. I think we're going to be kind of like rotating. We'll figure that part of it out. But there's going to be live commentary with us, with Dave, just talking through the crazy turns. You're going to see some weird stuff in the Daimyo format. It's pretty awesome, I got to say.
Yeah, I think it'll be the first time that will have been publicly streamed. I know that Dave and Rhiannon said that there was like a ton of people internationally that were buying her full art Daimyo Halls of the Daimyo Stronghold. So this will be a chance for. I know I've heard it on at least 3 other podcasts that have talked about the format that he came up with and that she did the artwork for and whatnot. This is kind of like a cool little way to expose it even more so and kind of get some little charity event behind it too.
Yeah, so you can check that out on twitch.tv/meekinformant. And again, you can donate live there. You can enter into the raffle. So it's going to be great.
Yeah, and I guess one thing though I always say on these things or think about in these things is like if you don't want to donate to this particular cause or maybe not you don't feel comfortable with this particular link, find a charity that makes sense for you and like take the time to just donate to something that makes that you care about. And so that's kind of the point of this type of stuff, and that's something that L5R community is pretty passionate about. So
Yeah, for sure. It was one of the big things in the old game was charity tournaments and stuff, and I'm glad to see it coming back with the new game. So
cool. Hey, so last episode we learned how to build decks, but didn't do anything with those decks. What do we do with those decks now?
they're just sitting in a box, and there they stay forever, right? That's how it works.
Yeah, I mean that's what happens to me lately.
Oh,
But yeah. Now, so what we want to do for everybody here today is to try and provide a little bit of structure to how either we test our decks, or we've heard other people, or we've got input to, and in no way do we think this is kind of like the ultimate list of how to test your decks. But I guess the main takeaway from this is it's important to test your decks. And whether they're like your funsy decks or not, like you can always learn something from your games. And so we wanted to kind of give some resources on how we do that, which they're pretty obvious, but at the same time, how we can like what do you take away from those games? When you've built a deck in its early lifestyle, it's sort of like what is like how do I make this better, or is this even good? So we want to kind of walk through a couple of those concepts here and give you guys some ideas on doing that testing.
Yeah. So, the first thing, and this was actually goes to a question that we got from Facebook. Todd Pullen asked how to get in games when the local area is small. So he says, how do you deck test in an area that has limited numbers of players? I felt one of my main weaknesses at Gen Con, ooh, made it to Gen Con, awesome, this year was that my player group consisted of me and one other player who plays regularly, and I just didn't have the play experience against the majority of the field. So the best answer to that is Jigoku. It is the easiest way to get in a game at any time. You can jump on, you throw up a game, odds are good you're going to be playing a game within 10 minutes. And because it does all the shuffling and the tokens and everything for you, it can play a little bit quicker if you're able to. It's annoying for some people who play it in paper because there's things that you might miss on Jigoku that you wouldn't miss in real life because your opponent has to do it a little more obviously. But if you keep an eye on that chat, you can, get a good idea of what's going on and hopefully not miss too much. But the big thing to note is that like no matter what you do, this game takes a long time to play. So you're never going to get to the point where you have like a statistical sample, where you're going to be able to say, all right, well, my win rate is 68.2% when I, go up against Unicorn or something like that. It's just not going to happen. There's too many variables and it's too difficult to track. So
yeah, the only way to get that statistical sample, I think, would be you and a buddy build the meta decks. Like this is like more prepping for a tournament than just grinding games out for a deck. Like if you're trying to compete the meta decks, like you can get statistical samples in that case, but you'd have to like sit there for like a weekend and just crank out them. And that's like still very limited statistically.
I was going to say, yeah. I mean, the margin of error there is not going to be small if you're only
No,
playing,
it's not. But
20, 30
it's
games.
probably the closest. Yeah, it's the closest you're going to get to something that gives you some real, maybe not real, but like some inkling of evidence as to where things are. And I think that's what a lot of the high level, what a lot of the tournament players try and do right before an event, right? If you can Like, I think before Worlds, people try and figure out. That's why everyone says, "I want the meta to settle so that we know what it's like for going into X event," and that's obviously its own
Yeah.
discussion. But I think that's part of what people are trying to look for is they want the meta to level so they can have the X number of decks per clan that they can test against. And there's like, everyone's busy. I'm busy. We're all busy people. We're adults, most of us, and like it's hard to find the time to get that statistical sample. So it's pretty difficult. Jigoku does get you a lot of games in, but it's like a pendulum of swings. It's a good game, bad game, good opponent, bad opponent. So you get what you get. I think to kind of find this is something that other podcasts mention, and I think it's important. The Discord, the L5R international Discord, right, is really welcoming, and you just need to like pop your head into any of the various channels there, get acclimated in there, and find your clan maybe first, but then I think that there's a lot of people willing to help you test your decks out, and the big one is don't be shy to ask for games.
Yeah, for
Go
sure.
up there and ask for. I mean, Nick, you're a perfect example. Like you're someone that I think a lot of Crane people look to as far as knowing what Crane is doing, and like I like playing against you. I'm sure other people come to you, like finding the person that it has their finger to the pulse of the current Crane deck or the current Scorpion deck or whatever deck, and just saying, hey, whenever you have time, you mind just running me through a couple of the meta decks, and they're on there, and people are very willing. And I think the just going to Jigoku and randomly finding games, you're gonna get like a at best a 50-50 of good and bad games. But if you go on Discord, you'll
Yeah.
find the people. And
Yeah.
that's only if you can't find people locally. We are very lucky locally, and I don't mean just like New Hampshire, but in New England, where I can see the same people, I can play the same people in person as I play online, and the people, the resources of people are available to play against. So I feel for you there, Todd, and all I can say is probably just try and use us as a resource, use Discord as a resource, and hey, let us know if you want to help introducing to other people, because there's some of us that do play a lot more than others and can try and get you those games in, those repetitions.
Yeah. So uh, then, if you're not getting a huge number of games, right, the key is to try to learn something from every game, right? So even the ones that you get totally blown out, right? You got to ask why. The ones that you walk away with winning, right? You need to look at and say, all right, well, how could I have played that a little bit better? Could I have ended it one turn sooner or something like that? So that gets into like what you're going to do to change the deck over time. So a lot of the things that I look at when you're talking about what to change are things that you put in there because you're like, oh, this is going to be awesome. It's super powerful. It's got this great effect. It does something that I want it to do. But then you're not able to play it for whatever reason. So, like a good example of this is when the game first came out, I was in love with a card called Fallen in Battle, which is one fate when you win a military conflict by 5 or more, kill a defending character. Um, it looks amazing. Killing through fate is extremely powerful in the game, but the number of military buffs for most clans is relatively low. And a lot of times, if you're going to win by 5, if you're capable of winning by 5, then your opponent's just not going to defend. And you've got this card in your hand that you can't trigger. Or they're going to defend with some little guy just to prevent the honor loss. And like, great, yeah, you can kill their obstinate recruit. Good job. Um, just at the end of a turn, I often look at my hand and say, all right, what in here could I not play at all? Not the stuff that I chose not to play, but the stuff where I never had an opportunity to play it. A good example of this is for me. I ended up cutting for shame after a while because I had cut down and cut down and cut down on my courtiers, and I just didn't have enough courtiers to reliably trigger for shame. So it would sit dead in my hand for a turn or two every time I drew it, unless I was very lucky. So it it became a card to where I love the effect. It's extremely useful for what my deck wants to do. But if you're just going to draw a dead card, you might as well draw nothing, right? So you might as well draw a card that is more consistent. Um, but you can't go too far on that because some of them are powerful enough when they are usable that they're worth putting in the deck anyway. Great example of that is Censure. Obviously, only one person can have Censure on at once, because it requires you to have the Imperial favor. Um, but it's such a powerful card. It's free. It cancels your opponent's actions. You get to use it whenever you want. It's so powerful when it's live that it's worth keeping. So don't just say that just because you couldn't play a card during a turn, it definitely needs to come out. There's going to be cases where that happens with every card in the game. But if you always have it in your hand every turn, and you can play it maybe one or two out of the turns in an entire game, might not be as good.
Yeah, and so that censure is a good one too. And I'm looking at our notes here. That sort of segues into the idea that censure also, if you're not say I'm not running censure, but I assume that my opponent is, it still is beneficial for me to have the favor. Like, I mean, it's always good to have the favor, but like it warps the game play a little bit, where you're trying to hold the favor knowing that your opponents are, if they get the favor, have their censure online.
Yep.
And the same thing is to be said for cards like Noble Sacrifice, Way the Crab. Like, those are cards that people put in decks that are for the open deck lists kind of like gameplay concept, that they keep people honest, right? We always say keeping so and so honest, because like, oh, cool, Scorpion loves to dishonor their stuff. Well, if I'm facing Crane or someone splashing Crane, and they might have Noble Sack available to them, I have to be a little bit more cautious with my Forged Edicts, as an example, right? And so,
Yep.
like, there's a element of, it's not bluffing, but awareness in how your play style is, that is adjusted. So like your deck that you built, you need to kind of think about those things as you're playing, and use those as data points as to if you would adjust your deck card in or card out. And so those are the types of things you need to, they're matchups, but they're not like clan specific matchups. They're like situational matchups that you need to be cognizant of in your gameplay.
Yep. Yep. So you do that every turn. You can also do it at the end of a game. You want to be careful about taking too many lessons away from that, though, because generally you want to draw as many cards as you can. You're never going to go, I think I only need 2 cards more to win this game, and just draw
Right.
2, right? You're going to draw as many as you can. So you're going to end most games with some cards in your hand. But if there are any that sat in your hand for a while, or that are always in your hand at the end of the game, where on that last turn you're not able to play them, or they're not worth playing, that's something that maybe you take a look at those cards and say, they're too expensive, they're too hard to trigger, or they're so situational that maybe I don't need them, or maybe I keep them in, like Adam was saying, keep people honest. Noble Sacrifice, Way of the Crab, good examples. But you realize when you draw it that, okay, well, this might be a dead draw for most of this game, but it's a good threat to have in my back pocket. So
Yeah, and I think that's I mean, as being a Scorpion player, which most people who know I am, like, that's where the favorite niece, which is a topic I feel like we bring up often, but like, she get any forget her for a second, any effect in the game that lets you cycle cards out that you've had in your deck for semi-situational situations, you can, you get a lot of value out, right? Because, as Nick is saying, you're never going to not want to draw 5. I mean, there's times you don't when you're low in honor, but you know what I mean? Like, you always want more cards. Well, if I have 5 cards I just drew and one of them is dead, well, that's an extra card I just got. If you can cycle one out that is not going to come up in a certain state of the game. And
yeah,
so those are really powerful effects. But they also, thinking about how that effect, if you don't have access to that effect, how to make your decks more streamlined, to kind of like make sure you might not. I actually just recently did like a little building like this weird line deck. So, anyways, it's like I realized I'm going to just go back to simples, right? Like, make all 3 ofs, because why put some of those randoms in there? And like, sometimes you have to kind of think about that. If I have all these kind of not one-offs, but one-off effects, and I don't mean one-off cards, like one-off effects in the sense that, well, if this situation really comes up, it's probably still not a game-winning situation, or it's not going to change the way I can play out this turn enough to push it forward. I feel like you just drop those cards, right? And that's the tough thing about these is, at some point when you're building your deck, before you've played it, you're going, oh, this is a really cool effect, and then you realize like that effect may come up, but it is not an effect that's going to come up often enough that's going to help me win a game, or win this conflict, or
right.
win the favor this turn. And that's the step away I think that happens mostly at the end of for me I think it's end of a turn, and I don't think I'm good enough to think back for an entire game and all those moments. I usually think end of turn and I go, oh yeah, that card comes out, or that the three ofs of that card come out, or the two ofs, whatever.
Yeah. So, and then the other thing you can do, right, is often when you're deck building, you're going to end up with, I really want to fit in card A, and I also want to fit in card B, but I only have so many slots. So what I would recommend doing there is picking one of them, right? So don't like go back and forth between them, or go like one and one. Put in like, two or three of card A. But when you're testing, have a note made or throw a little piece of paper into the sleeve and just say, okay, when I draw this, am I happy that it's card A, or would I rather have card B? So a good example, for a while, I had cut ornate fans entirely, and I was running formal invitation because it has some political buff, and it also has this use as like pulling in opponents' high glory characters. It's really useful for a harpoon. And what I found is that I just needed the raw stats more, right? It was far more often that I would need to just throw two political on a guy than I would throw one political, but I only have a limited number of targets because they have to be two or higher glory, and or draw in an opponent's guy on a political conflict. Like it was just better to have raw stats. Um, I still play formal invitation. I just cut other cards for it, basically, rather than ornate fan. So that kind of thing where you can really, when you're between two cards, you can, in practice, when you draw the card, say, all right, I'd really rather have this be an ornate fan right now. That would be much better. And then if that happens often enough, you say, all right, maybe that card needs to go. Maybe that replacement didn't work out.
I agree, and like this is the same thing on the dynasty side, right? So like I have situations in Scorpion that I pass on characters, but it's kind of rare. I mean, I say rare in the sense that we just want a bunch of chuds. This lion deck that I've been putzing around with is really weird. Is warping in my mindset from a purchasing perspective. As an example, for lion and any other clan right now that has a way to pull stuff out of the recursion elements out of their dynasty or their discard pile, you have to kind of think about it a little bit differently though, right? Like I might be able to discard all my stuff, or maybe when I buy a character, I get to flip over a new one to maybe purchase what's my copy guard? Is that the right one? No. What's the one that lets you flip over a new dynasty character?
A Kodo Gunso.
Comes in a Kodo Gunso. There you go. There you go, Nick. That's why I need you. You're my encyclopedia. But yeah, those are ones that like kind of change your thought process. Like I'm building Scorpion, building a Lion deck. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is so weird. And not to mention, there's a lot of unique characters in Lion that just change your thought process. With that said, you have things like Spirit Caller that can bring stuff back from the dead. We have the new Phoenix Splash that lets us bring characters in and all that kind of stuff. So that warps things. And to kind of give an example that's a little bit more, I'll say, towards my Scorpion mindset, is I put into this Lion deck the neutral was Armament Artisan, and I was like, oh yeah, this guy's going to synergize really well. A bunch of Lion guys in there that are going to honor up, and when he's in play, he gets to get honored as well, and like counter the Crane and all that kind of jazz. And he's a Bushi, and then I was like, every time he came up in my dynasty, I'm like, man, I should buy him, but he costs 2. Like it's just one of those, and he's not a lion, and a lot of lion stuff triggers off of a lion. So honestly, he does synergize, but he also literally anti-synergizes. So it's like he has this niche situation where he's really good, and like those niche situations are firing when somebody else with pride wins, and I don't know, anything else that they can get out from. Like there's a bunch of random ones like Ayuchi or whatever his name is, the covert dude. Like there's other ones out there, Ikehata, yeah, and it's like, yeah, but that requires me getting that character, having it win, and then like other things happening as well. And it just you start to think, okay, was that too much? Is that doing too much? And that's a lot of, I think, going from the deck building to the playing, right? This is a really cool thing. I can do this really cool thing. And I think this is, for me personally, and I know people argue this, that's where the jank, that's like your jank spectrum, right? I always think, this is a really cool thing I can do. It's like, yeah, you did it, but did it do anything? You know, cool. I honored up this artisan. He's a bushi. He can go into a conflict, and he's a 2-0. Now he's a 3-1, and I can maybe use things to buff him more. And like, is he worth 2 at that point? And I think that's the stuff that once you play with it, you start to second guess not the inserting of it, but the am I ever going to play it? Is this ever going to come up?
Yeah, people that you pass on consistently on your dynasty, I mean, you should consider whether they
Cut.
need to be in there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
Right.
I
Unless you have a way to bring it back. Like unless that's part of the game plan where them
right.
going away is you
Right.
bringing them back.
Yeah, I mean, if you're playing some sort of like reanimator or something, then that's definitely like a different style. But like even then, how many times is that person in your discard pile and you go, yeah, let's get that guy out
Yeah,
and
exactly.
bring him into
Instead of
play.
the other one that's better.
Exactly.
So
Yep.
yeah.
Yep. So,
Yeah. So
so yeah.
I'll just 1 second. I'll mention too, and it's kind of not in the framework of what we're talking about here, but it's worth saying like playing other decks also will help you think about other clans decks will help you think about the elements of the game in a different way. And it doesn't necessarily help your current deck of whatever your favorite clan is, but it does make you rethink the game overall. It just makes you kind of holistic, better, better thought process in the game.
So the last piece of it, and this is something that you'll kind of discover through testing. I I think that your success with the deck is going to depend a lot on whether you, at least early on, whether what you want to do in the game fits what the deck wants to do. So like basically, does your play style match up? So a good example, right? Scorpion want to, by few people on Dynasty side, play mostly out of their conflict deck, dishonor enemies, things like that. Crane want to put a guy out with a bunch of fate, get him honored, and start smashing things. You know, I mean, just run him into provinces. Um, and if what you want to do as Crane is play very few guys out of Dynasty and play mostly out of your conflict deck and things like that, the deck isn't going to work as well with it as you might want. You know, Crab want to defend a lot, right? I mean, they're stronghold, they get all these buffs for defending. And if you want to just do like a super swarmy aggro deck, well, maybe you're better off going Lion, right? So there's a bunch of different play styles available. But you know, and you may find that your deck's not working for you, and it may just be because your instincts are to do something that the deck or the faction doesn't really want to do, doesn't do very well.
Yeah, I think one example I have of this, again, going and actually, the lion deck I keep referring to is I do want to do a deck building. It was a spawn of an idea going back to building of decks from our last episode. It was a spawn of an idea that I ended up building a deck from. But I played it, I think it was last week or 2 weeks ago. I think against was you first, Nick, and then like played a couple more games with it, and I realized I had a bunch of, and I was like, oh, this is. I mean, it's lion, so yeah, typically a little bit extra honor, but I didn't have any assassinates in my deck. And I was like, oh, well, this deck is sort of like a weird dishonored lion deck, not at all running for honor at all. Like it definitely gets up on the honor, but that's not the point. And I was like, oh, this means I can run 2 or 3 assassinates. And so typically you can play a deck a few times and you start to realize, well, it's not just the cards in there, but it's also the way you're playing it. And so what are you doing with your bids? How many duels are you forcing to change the dials in the bid or the dials during bids? And what does that do for your honor? And a lot of times you can run cards that you might not have run before, right? Assassinate
Yeah.
being prime example. And this it kind of goes back to what you were saying before is your play style with the Crane deck was, well, formal invitation was in there, but then you realize you just needed raw political buffs. And so your deck in that case was trying to get a little sneaky, not sneaky, but less efficient on political to do other stuff, but then you kind of at the detriment of doing what it already does well. And so in this
Yep.
lion deck, I'm doing a little bit of the I literally am testing this out. This is like in no way should anybody perceive what I'm saying is like this is the new lion deck because it's totally not. But it's a fun deck to play, and I'm just trying to explore different ways of playing the game for me and playing lion. And so I'm going through the machinations here of all of the concepts that we've kind of been talking about the past episode in this one, and trying to figure out, oh, this is kind of cool. Like, it gives me some new options to play differently. And I definitely come at it makes you come at the game a little sideways. So like a clan may be doing one thing really well, but you might be able to shift it a little bit. With that said, there's a few things that like you can't really adjust too much. Like, I do agree that Scorpion does want to dishonor. Is that always the win condition? No. Is Crane always wanting to honor? Yeah, but is that their win condition? No, right? Like, I mean, does Crane, besides that one time, not one time, I think you've done it at least once, right? At a tournament where you honored out with Crane?
Yeah, twice. Twice now.
Yeah. It's not their main win condition. It's things that you want to do. Like, same thing with Lion. Lion still wants to have high military. That doesn't mean that I can't also do dishonor things to make it harder for my opponent, where I can still potentially dishonor them out. But really, in retrospect, it's going to really be me just winning on breaks, because they're not going to have enough stuff, because I either kill it or they can't even defend. So it's I guess looking at the different ways to play a clan sometimes, and then weighing, is this different way to play a win condition, or is this just a cool niche thing?
Yeah, and I think that makes this kind of like the hardest piece to assess. Like for instance, I know Johnny has been moving over to playing more Crab recently, because he's just, he started the game as a Unicorn player, played a ton of Unicorn, and now is kind of figuring out that like the Unicorn deck is a faster speed, a different pace than he actually really wants to play. So it's kind of changed. He's playing more Crab. I think he's still playing some Unicorn, but when he plays, he's more likely to play Crab because it fits him a little bit better, he thinks. Another one, a local one, Luis Espinoza, recent top 16 at Gen Con. Congrats, Luis. He started out as a Crab player for a long time, super defensive, build the board, all that kind of stuff. And then he tried playing, control-y, dishonor focused Scorpion, and basically has not looked back, aside from to say, oh God, Crab, you're so bad compared to playing Scorpion. So like he found they kind of found things that fit them better. But you need to know that it is the deck, not you, if that makes sense. It takes a relatively high level of skill and a lot of plays to figure out that, it isn't that I'm not playing the deck correctly, or I guess it is that you're not playing the deck correctly, but it's more that, it's the issue is with a mismatch between me and the deck, and not my skills are too low and need to come up. That part is really hard to assess until you've played it a lot. So, don't get discouraged and just say, oh, well, this deck doesn't do what I want to do immediately. But if you consistently find that the things you're trying to do with your deck aren't supported by it, you might try looking at a different faction or a different win condition or something like that.
Yeah, and I'll be perfectly blunt too. Like, ask your friends, ask other people how to make it better, because you should be able to describe what you want the deck to do, how you think it should get to that point, and I don't just mean like, oh, I need this combo of cards, because like that's I think a little bit of a trap to fall into. Is like, I need these cards to happen, or I need to do this, and it's all this type of situation I need to come to fruition. You need to just be able to describe like, this is my game plan if I see this, and this is. I mean, early on in the game, there was very little dial manipulation, at least here in the U.S. Like, the dial manipulation was like, everyone bids 5, bid 5, bid 5, bid 5. And I think in some way, and correct me if I'm wrong here, Nick, but I feel like in this day and age in L5R, we've shifted less towards the bid 5 always. I mean, as I said earlier, you want 5 cards, you want all the cards. But there is now, with a little bit more dueling, a little bit more dishonor effects throughout the game, that you're sometimes, I feel like I'm seeing a little bit more of people's choices in bidding. And so that's part of this. That's part of the discussion. Like, if you're telling your friend is, I need some input on this, like, you need to just be able to describe what your game plan is, what your win condition is, how you think you're going to get there, and what your bid, I'll call it, spectrum, how you think you're going to bid over time. Like, are you always going to bid 5 until your opponent bid 2 or 1, and then the next turn you bid low, and you're okay with that because you've banked a bunch of honor? Or are you running really like close to the sun, where the second your opponent bids 1 and you bid 5, you're like, oh gosh, I only have 2 honor left. Now I need an air ring, and like those are important elements to the play style of your deck, right? That's not only that's actually a little bit of how your deck plays, but also how you want to play your deck and how you structured your deck, your card composition with what your bid is going to be. And I think I actually am pretty happy with where the dial mechanic is now. I think it adds just enough interesting decision points in the game that every play style can have a little bit of nuance difference. And so, yeah, I guess my point is make sure you can enumerate and explain what that is, and look for that input. Look for other people to kind of give you some insight. I know I'm not as versed in all of the cards off the top of my head as other people. You included there, Nick. Like I use deck of 5 rings like all the time. Like, oh, I forgot that card did half of that. You know what I mean? Like, or I forgot that there's this hole this other clan has access to that they could be running this card in. Is it good? I don't know, but like you forget it. And so asking the people that have either another clan that's their main clan or another clan that they play once in a while and just getting any insight is really quite fun. That's actually how this Lion deck originally started, was from that like random thought process and talking at a game night. So
All right. I think that about covers everything as far as deck testing. But again, the biggest thing is play a bunch of games. You need to just get a ton of data, ton of reps in before you can really judge almost anything in this game. So, yeah.
I'll give a shout out to the builder too. I think not everyone must not know about this, but if you have a deck and you are good about updating it, I don't say rarely, but like if you update a bunch of card composition in it all at once and then save it, I believe it's every hour after an hour of no activity on that deck, it will show you a change log. And I have it up here. So if you're in your deck box and you go deck and then say, then you get dropped on the build spot, if you go all the way over to manage, and that'll pop up your save options, I think by default sharing and lineage, you can click change log and it'll show you your deck change history. And I find this to be a really cool way to see your thought process over the time. And the one caveat to this is sort of make sure that you don't just go randomly changing stuff in here. Like do it very specifically to like a change. Like I have one in here from a couple of days ago where I was like, oh, here's all the notes I took in my mind when I played this deck two weeks ago or so. When I played Nick, I played James, like I played Casey, or whoever else I played there. I was like, okay, this was some of the takeaways. I put the cards. What I did is I took the cards from that game night and I put the ones on the top of my deck, each of my conflict in my dynasty deck, of ones that I knew I wanted to kind of like adjust out. And I removed some, I added some, and it's all snapshotted here in a way that can make me. I wish there was a way, to be honest, for me, because I'm a software engineer. I wish there was a way for me to be like, this is the change request. This was like a comment why I made this change. But my point is, like, if you do it, you do at least get an idea. Oh, I took out this and that. Okay, that was where I was. Why I did that. And what's cool is you can kind of go back too. You can then say, oh, let me go back to the way it was. And if you don't love that change log for that purpose only, you can also just do snapshots under save options, where you can say snapshot the deck or clone and save the deck as a new one and kind of branch off. And I'm a big proponent of Bushi Builder for that reason. So that's another resource for people to kind of be able to play with if they didn't know it existed.
And one more thing that Bushi Builder can do that is pretty cool is it has a tab on it called Shuffle that'll show you basically what it thinks your average. It lets you shuffle up and deal a dynasty flop, so you can see, all right, on this number of them, I'm getting 4 holdings at once. That's not good. I need fewer holdings, or I've got too many cheap characters because all I'm flopping are cheap characters when I want to have bigger guys, things like that. It can help you test the consistency just of the initial mulligan stage. So it can be a good way to test that and see how you want to proceed.
Yeah, definitely.
So yeah, I think that is about it. That's all I've
there
got.
There was one last question that was posted in our Facebook thread
yes,
that is totally important, not related but still related, and it was from Doug Barr. I'm going to say
Bear?
Doug Barr.
I'm going to say
Barr.
We'll
Okay,
just say all of them, and one of us will be right.
Barry.
There you go.
Barry. It's a picture of a dog. It's a very cute looking
It's
dog.
4 letters. I don't know how we're getting it wrong. But anyway, Doug
Yeah.
asks, what is the best type of whiskey to drink while playing L5R? So I will hand this over to Adam because I do not drink whiskey.
I am not a whiskey expert in any way, but I do like whiskey. For me, in general, I will drink Bullet at any point, Bullet bourbon. There is some rye that is by Bullet as well, and that is quite delicious. And on the rocks, straight up, whatever is great. If you're looking for a little single malt scotch, I am a big fan. My wife is not because it is super smoky and it makes you smell like you walked out of a smokehouse. But Lafroig, which I'm probably butchering, and again, I'm not claiming to be an expert, but that's one of my favorite whiskeys or single malt scotches. So those are my 2/3. Maker's Mark, you can't go wrong. Whatever, it is a thing. If you're making a Long Island iced tea, which hey, take a whiskey like a Jack Daniels and throw it in there, why not? So there's no shortage of drinks with whiskey in them, whether it's by itself or with somebody else or something else in it.
This is the information you come here to this podcast to get, folks.
Yeah, we never we never claim to be totally right. We're just meekly informant.
Yeah. So, by the way, I should throw in Eric had his responses to this. He said, for regular occasions, I'd say Elijah Craig, and for special occasions, I'd say Whistle Pig, which has a great name, and I want to try it just based on the name.
Those are Whistle Pig is actually quite good. Yeah, I think I've had that either at Eric or Johnny's place, or I can't remember. But all there, I like I said, not an expert, but if you look up whiskey, it's actually quite an array of options out there. It's not. It's like saying I play card games, right? That's pretty much that's like whiskey. Whiskey is like playing card games. So that's probably why like Doug Barber BR whatever his name was asked the question.
Actually, he's one of the Crane players. So I've talked to him a fair bit, and he did his entire deck build for Gen Con after several whiskeys, which led to him trying to play Support of the Crane with Scorpion cards in the deck.
This is life choices that are made.
Yep.
Wow.
And then I believe he said he was drinking basically through the entire Gen Con tournament, and he considered a success because he ended the tournament with some whiskey left. So there you go.
Wow.
He probably, I think, is more experienced at whiskey drinking in L5R than any of us. So
there's no shortage of people who game competitively and drink excessively. I've learned in my various competitive gaming, and it's quite fun. There was one friend of mine who won a Adepticon tournament playing Malifaux, and he could not flip his own cards because he was so drunk. They had to have a judge do it for him, and he still won the tournament.
Amazing.
Yes, it was fantastic.
Yeah, this reminds me of
shout out to Andrew Weekland.
I know one of the big draws to the Feeding Hills Kotai, which was like the first Kotai of the season. It was a big traditional thing down in Connecticut. And one of the draws was that it was held at a place that had a bar in the venue. Yeah, Polish American Hall. Apparently a great place to hang out if you want to play cards and get drunk.
Yes.
Anyway, I think that will do it for us. So let's see if I can remember the outro when Eric came.
I'll give you a second. If you want to know the outro reaction, it's after you play this character, look at in a hand.
So you have the character pulled up because you thought you were going to. All right.
No, I play a Scorpion deck often, so I do know that card.
All right,
but I thought it'd be funny to just say that's what the Meek Informant does, right? Just look at your hand.
Yep, that's it. That's our outro. Look at your opponent's hand. No, remember, samurai seldom notice peasants, but peasants always notice samurai.
You've been listening to The Meek Informant. You can find us on the web at www.facebook.com/The Meek Informant, and can subscribe to our podcast through Google's podcast app, Apple's podcast app via iTunes, or Podbean at themeekinformant.podbean.com/feed.xml. Want to continue the conversation about today's topic or any of our other content? We can be reached via our Facebook page or email themeekinformant@gmail.com. We also have a Twitter account @meekinformant. Our YouTube or Twitch accounts can also be found by searching for The Meek Informant. If you would like to help others find us, please consider writing a review on iTunes or wherever you subscribe to our show. Thanks for listening, and remember, samurai seldom notice peasants. Peasants always notice samurai.